Hello and welcome to today's lecture. I'm going to look at the concept of community in the first part of today's lecture. In the second part, we're going to look at the concept of neo-endogenous development. And finally, in the third part, I'm going to provide an example of neo-endogenous development which has been implemented in practice, and that is the LEADER program. So in this first part of today's lecture, I'm just going to look at what is community, because community enterprises are very much rooted in community and in community development. And there has been an exasperating but fascinating debate amongst academics and policymakers as to what actually constitutes a community and coming up with a common definition for it. And basically, it can be defined in very simple terms as groups of people with something in common. They may share a geographical location, they may share similar interests, or they may belong to a particular group within society. And I will be looking at these three elements in greater detail within this video. And from a sociological point of view, Durkheim and Payne have put forward two different definitions as to what community or communities can be. For instance, Payne states that communities place a requirement on their members to limit their individualism and to acknowledge their dependence on a wider network of relationships, whilst Durkheim states that community represents a move away from a narrow self-interest as a motivating factor for people, as this is an insufficient base for sustainable social relationships. So basically, these two sociologists are telling us that that community very much revolves around group work and very much an abundance of looking at individualism and self-interest, and that very much sustainable relationships should be forged amongst people. As I stated before, community can incorporate three different elements. We can have geographical locations or place locations, and this is what we often associate with community. People living in a defined geographical area, i.e., living in your parish, which is very important, and in Ireland it gives an essence of identity as to where you come from, and this would be similar for individuals living in other countries across the globe too. And we may ask the question: is it a place of residence? We can ask the question: is place of residence a determining characteristic for what a community is? It is very much used in politics and in area-based planning, i.e., making a community plan for a predefined geographical location. And it's very important to consider who defines the boundaries as to where one lives. It assumes that people living in a geographical area have something else other than residence in common. It's important to know that it does not allow for a division based on class, gender, or ethnicity, for example. And it is very much a practical way of defining community, but it may not always be effective. Community of interest refers to people who share a place in the wider social structure or who are interested in the same thing. And examples might include women's groups, environmental activists, occupational groups, political parties, or maybe a group who have a particular interest in music or a genre of music. And in the literature, there's a lot of talk about communities of interest being very, very important. For instance, in urban community work, it has shifted its emphasis from an overall concern with issues in the geographical area to a focus on specific issues and communities of interest. So therefore, the topics which are covered in urban community work often revolve around urban disadvantage, looking at why maybe particular social classes are congregated in particular locations within the city, and maybe what problems or challenges this may cause. We may also put maybe the concept of community enterprise into this category as a community of interest, because individuals who wish maybe to establish a community enterprise are doing so maybe out of a particular interest, maybe to provide services or goods in an area or in a location where the market is no longer serving the needs of the community or the residents of the area, or where the state is no longer providing services. And this may occur in rural areas especially, where there may not be a significant population base. The third type of community, which is referred to in the literature, is communities of attachment. In essence, people map out their social identities and find their social orientations among the relationships which are symbolically close to them, rather than in relation to an abstracted sense of society. They therefore make their own community. And it's important to note that community is not a neutral word. It may involve sets of beliefs, feelings, attitudes based on core issues around ethnicity, class, sexual orientation. And from a sociological perspective, it is very much linked to the concepts of social stratification and identity. People identify themselves belonging to particular groups within society. And as I said, this could revolve maybe around their ethnicity, class, or sexual orientation. Thus, in community work, we often talk about the Black community, the gay community, or the LGBT community, or the traveller or Roma community. These are just a few examples. There are many more out there. These communities may share beliefs, attitudes, language, tradition, customs, yet live miles away from each other and never even meet. But they all belong. They all share something in common. Since communities are constructed around members having something in common, then community may be constructed as a phenomenon of social cohesion. It's a glue or a gel which binds people together. And this is true whether we're referring to communities of attachment, communities of interest, or a place community. Community has a practical function for organising maybe social services, maybe for the provision of education, healthcare, for the provision of retail and other services. Community as a base can be a base for organising action and campaigns. This may happen, for instance, if a community maybe wants, maybe a community is opposing maybe the closure of a school or a shop or a pub within his area, or maybe campaigning against maybe, for instance, maybe the erection of wind turbines or other items which the community does not want. It may be also a campaign for better, maybe public transportation services. Community refers also to symbols, values, and ideologies which bind or bring people together. And when we look at the literature, there are many definitions put forward as to what community development is. And when a community comes together, maybe to set up a social enterprise or a community-owned enterprise, they are in essence taking part in a community development initiative. And therefore it's very important for us to look at the key definitions which surround this concept of community development. It is important to note as well that there are many definitions and there are subtle differences between them. For instance, if we take the All-Ireland Standards for Community Work, the policy framework which brings community development together here in Ireland, it's defined as a developmental activity comprised of both a task and process. The task is a social change to achieve equality, social justice and human rights. And the process is the applications of principles of participation, empowerment and collective decision-making in a structured and coordinated way. And it's very important maybe to point out several key words here. Participation is incredibly important. Everybody should be able to participate and engage in collective action. Therefore, it's not non-discriminatory. It should be empowering those who may be disenfranchised in society. And another key definition coming from a European policy is the Budapest Declaration, which was signed in 2004. It describes community development as a way of strengthening civil society by prioritising the actions of communities and their perspectives in the development of social and economic and environmental policy. It seeks the empowerment, and we see that word again coming across, empowerment of local communities, strengthens the capacity of people as active citizens through their organisations and the capacity of institutions and agencies to work in dialogue with citizens to shape and determine change in their communities. And we would hope that the changes which are implemented in communities are positive rather than negative, and that they are not, and that the change is non-discriminatory, and that this is empowering. When we look furthermore, the Budapest Declaration states that community development plays a crucial role in supporting active democratic life by promoting the autonomous voice of disadvantaged and vulnerable communities based on the principles of human rights, social inclusion, equality and respect for diversity, and a specific skills and knowledge base. And it is very interesting to note, more often than not, a community-owned enterprise is set up maybe to serve the interests of disadvantaged and vulnerable communities, because maybe key services and goods are not being provided to these cohorts, and therefore community enterprises need to appreciate as key social constructs around human rights, social inclusion and equality, and respect for diversity. Another definition comes from the European Community Development Network, and it describes community development as being fundamentally about people working together to change their collective circumstances. It has established a clear intention, strong value-based and tested processes, all of which are connected in seeking to contribute to change in the lives of communities. It is a globally growing practice, dynamically reflecting diverse communities, conditions, contexts and challenges. For Europe, it can be a powerful force in challenging injustice, environmental and economic crises, protecting human rights, advancing civil society, and encouraging democratic and civic participation. And when we look at the foundations of community development, we can see that there are a number of key components attached to it. This diagram here actually comes from the All Ireland Standards for Community Work, and it very much captures both the policy direction of not only the Irish government, but the European Union and the European Commission. So we have 5 key criterion, or 5 core values. Community development and community work very much revolves around collectivity, everybody coming together to participate in making a positive change for a community, to tackle social problems, to tackle issues which are having a negative impact on social cohesion within the community. And very much there needs to be an element of community empowerment, empowering individuals, especially those who are most marginalised and disadvantaged, to make decisions which impact on their daily lives. And furthermore, any changes which are implemented need to be based around social justice and sustainable development. The changes need to be cognizant of maybe protecting the environment, causing no harm for not only this generation but future generations, and that there needs, and in tandem with that, there needs to be human rights, equality, and anti-discrimination. Everybody needs to be included. Nobody is supposed to be left behind or marginalised. And finally, the next value is participation. Everybody should be able to participate. There should be no exclusionary criterion attached. It's important to note that all of these 5 values are not standalone. They need to be considered as a whole, because if one is left out, all the others fall down. And basically, these are 5 core values which are important for professional commitment and integrity. And all community workers need to be cognizant of this, which is also important for those who wish to maybe establish a community-owned enterprise. They need to embrace and appreciate all of these 5 core values too. And it brings me to my next slide around Arnstein's ladder of participation. In his seminal work in 1969, he identified 8 different types of participation. In the first 2 steps of the stairs, they're basically non-participatory and should be avoided at all costs. It's where maybe individuals are manipulated or maybe cured by implementing specific policies or interventions. And these policies and interventions do not consult or engage with the local community or particular groups. They're very adversarial and very much coming from a top-down basis. Whilst the next 3 steps into the stairs can be seen as maybe as tokenism. There might be some level of consultation or informing groups of what is happening, telling them what is going to take place, but not taking on board their viewpoints. Whilst the next 3 steps of the stairs, or the ladder, refer to citizen power, where the local community, or whether it's a community of interest, community of attachment, or geographical location or place, are engaging in some form of partnership or delegated power or citizen control. The local community is making decisions for themselves, of course leveraging resources provided by the state or statutory bodies, but they are having the biggest say as to what as to how maybe a problem or social issue can be fixed. And basically, in my opinion, the creation of a community-owned enterprise falls very much into level 8, citizen control, where the local groups or local actors have come together to set up a company, a community-owned company, in order to maybe provide goods or services which either the market or the state are not providing. And that could be a number of reasons why the state are not providing those services. And we should maybe bear this in mind when looking at the concept of community-owned enterprises. And finally, community-owned enterprises are very much fostering a bottom-up, locally based solution to solving problems. And it's important to note from a community development perspective, any interventions or actions are taking place from the ground up. It's most suited to local areas where strong groups can be built up. It allows projects and initiatives to be tailored to local situations, and therefore they can be very innovative. They can come up with tailored solutions which are suitable for the location and takes into consideration the socioeconomic makeup of an area, the levels of education attainment, the levels of it takes into consideration proximity to other services or the peripherality in other contexts. It's also important to note that bottom-up development is very responsive and flexible, and it responds to challenges as they occur. And from a community development perspective, they should be not dictated by the state, that local citizens have autonomy to make decisions for themselves. However, it is important to note that the social enterprise sector and community-owned enterprises do need support from the state, especially around capital infrastructure costs, around mentoring and guidance in order to facilitate the sustainable operations of the enterprise. And therefore, is maybe in the context of community-owned enterprises, it is important maybe to maybe go to embrace neo-endogenous development. It's a middle ground between bottom-up and top-down development. In the literature, neo-endogenous development could also maybe be referred to as the neighbourhood approach. And in the next lecture, I'm going to maybe tease this out in a little bit more detail.